Right, so it is day 91 of my attempt to plant a tree for every single day of 2023. It's actually twilight. There is still a little bit of light, it's not very much, so I'm using a torch so you can actually see me. And let's get on with it. Right, so today's planting is fairly straightforward. This is a peach, Prunus persica. It is not native to Iran, despite that name. It's native to China. It's going in between two other badly named trees, so it's going directly in between the sand olive, Dodonia viscosa, which does not produce any sort of olive, and Eriobotrya japonica, the loquat, which is, again, from China, not Japan. It's going to eventually be in the shade of a kaya, which is one of the native mahoganies, which is a very large, usually somewhat evergreen tree, and an albizia, which is a fairly large, very deciduous native tree which planted itself. That should be quite ideal because in this environment peaches often do better with a little bit of shade and shelter, and having the sort of shared canopy with the sand olive and the loquat, which is about 4 meters from the sand olive, about 2.5 meters from the loquat, that should create quite a nice continuous canopy, stop the ground underneath them from drying out too much. So even though this doesn't want to be wet in winter, it does want relatively high humidity in the ground if it's going to do well. Some varieties of peach won't fruit well in Zambia because we don't get as cold as a lot of the places they grow in, but there are quite a few now that do. This one is a seedling from the council nursery though, rather than an import, so it's probably a safe bet to say this is going to be a variety that is going to be able to fruit. I'm going to be putting that in with a Dastrina reflexa, which should shelter it from the afternoon sun, so that's going into the east of it. I'm putting in 2 little aloe cameroni, which should also provide a little bit of shelter while it's small, and then spread out and provide a sort of mid-sized ground cover as it gets bigger, and a couple of pieces of Kalanchoe fetchinkoi, which is going to provide a nice toxic barrier against anything that can eat the peach. The peach itself is going to act as a toxic barrier to the loquat eventually, because as their canopies sort of intertwine, I will be pruning the loquat probably slightly more, because peaches can be a little bit more finicky about pruning. And peaches are deciduous, so less inclined to shade out the loquat, so I'll probably end up encouraging the peach to be slightly higher and the loquat to be slightly lower than that. But they should get on quite well, and they should both sort of mutually protect each other, because peaches are fairly toxic in their own right, and loquats have their own quite different toxins. So provided they're not too stressed, they should work to protect one another. So right, so that should be everything for tonight. Thank you very much for watching. Please tune in again tomorrow when it really will be daylight. I really, really hope, because I actually know what I'm going to plant, I just have to decide where. So these lovely little colourful petals here on this blackjack are actually Acria serena, or all manner of other little names. So this is the small orange Acria. It's one of the rare instances where you'll get more traction out of a common name than a Latin name, and they are a beautiful little native poisonous butterfly. So they eat a lot of poisonous plants, very usually the euphorbias or spurges, which then they take the toxins of those plants and they incorporate them into their tissues, and so then the caterpillars and ultimately the butterflies become very bitter tasting and toxic, which means they get to flap around in very, very bright daylight without worrying too much about getting snacked on by a bird. It does also mean that an awful lot of less poisonous butterflies end up trying very, very hard to look like them. But yeah, small orange Acria, enjoy.